So, there's this new global body, and it's being sold as an alternative to the UN. It's already pledged billions to rebuild Gaza after a really devastating war. Now, this plan has some huge ambitions, but it's also stirring up massive controversy. Today on The Explainer, we're going to ask, is this a real path to peace, or is it a political gamble that's just destined to fail?
Plan B is going back to war. I mean, just let that sink in. That was the stark warning at the very first meeting of this new group, the Bourne of Peace. That statement really sets the stakes incredibly high, right? This isn't just about rebuilding buildings. It's about trying to break a cycle of really awful conflict.
So let's get into it. What exactly is this Board of Peace? Well, it popped up out of the ceasefire of a brutal 2-year war between Israel and Hamas, and it's got a massive mission. At its heart, the Board of Peace is being set up as a direct alternative to the United Nations. You've got representatives from over 40 nations, and its number one most urgent goal is to fund and manage the reconstruction of the war-torn Gaza Strip. And that mission kicked off with some really big promises. The first meeting in Washington, D.C. made some serious headlines with some major financial commitments. Right out of the gate, President Trump announced an initial pledge of $7 billion. This cash from 9 member nations is supposed to be the down payment on this absolutely monumental task of rebuilding. But here's the thing. That $7 billion, as huge as that number sounds, is just a drop in the bucket. Seriously. Estimates put the total cost to rebuild Gaza's infrastructure at $70 billion. So this initial pledge, it only covers about 10% of that. It's a start, for sure, but the funding gap is just enormous. Now, if you look at where the money's coming from, things get really interesting. As you can see here, several Gulf states have stepped up with billion-dollar pledges. The U.S. also promised an extra $10 billion, but, and this is a big but, it still has to get approved by Congress, so whether that money ever shows up is, pretty uncertain. And listen, it is not just about the cash. We're seeing all kinds of commitments. 5 nations have agreed to send troops for a stabilization force. Others are offering up their expertise to train police and rebuild things like schools and hospitals. And then, in a kind of a surprising twist, even FIFA is getting in on it, pledging millions for soccer fields and a new stadium. Okay, but here's the catch, and it is a huge one. All of these pledges, all of these plans, the money, the troops, the training, all of it hinges on one critical and so far completely unresolved issue, the disarmament of Hamas. And this right here is the core of the standoff. The U.S. and Israel are insisting that Hamas has to give up its weapons before any major reconstruction aid starts to flow. But Hamas is arguing that, no, an international force needs to be on the ground first to make sure they're secure. It's a total chicken and egg problem, and it's created a really dangerous stalemate. And the Israeli government has made its position crystal clear. This quote from Prime Minister Netanyahu pretty much says that patience is running out. It raises the very real possibility of more conflict if Hamas doesn't comply. So you can imagine, this fundamental disagreement over disarmament is fueling some deep skepticism about the whole project. Despite all the fanfare, a lot of global powers are watching this with some serious reservations. A lot of people see this less as a genuine breakthrough and more as, well, a political project. Critics are pointing out that it sidelines the UN, it doesn't have clear involvement from Palestinian leaders, and key Western allies like the UK, France, and Germany are all keeping their distance. There's this strong feeling that some countries are only participating to get on the White House's good side. Analyst Stephen Cook just perfectly captures the biggest fear for international donors here. Why would we spend billions of dollars on stuff that we build only to see it bombed again? Without a real, lasting political solution that gets to the root of the conflict, any money poured into rebuilding Gaza could literally just go up in smoke in the next war. And if all that wasn't complicated enough, there's this. Contracting records have reportedly revealed plans for a massive U.S. military base in southern Gaza. Now, it's intended for the International Stabilization Force, but the idea of a large, long-term American military footprint in Gaza, well, that raises a whole new set of really volatile questions. So what all this really shows is a giant gap between the ambitious vision they presented in Washington and the harsh realities on the ground for the people living in Gaza. So, in the end, the success or failure of this whole plan comes down to solving that disarmament dilemma. If it fails in Gaza, its grand ambition of becoming some kind of UN alternative, that's almost certainly going to fail with it. The Board of Peace has put billions of dollars and a lot of hope on the table. But the fundamental question is still there. Is this a real path to peace, or is it just a high-stakes gamble built on a really, really fragile foundation?